The following program is brought to you by Element 14, the electronics community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com/presents.
Hi, I'm David. Welcome back to the Electronics Inside, the show where we tear down toys, tools and appliances just to find out what's inside. Today we're dabbling in audio and we're going for the CambridgeAudio 640H. Light unit. Oh, look, even the remote control comes in its own little branded bag. Let me preface this by saying I'm not an audiophile. I like good quality sound, but I've never gone out of my way to find the best quality sound. I'm not even sure I've got the ears to tell the difference between the best sound and good sound. That said, I've got a rudimentary understanding of the technology behind it. I can tell you the difference between bit rates and frequency response and that kind of stuff, at least to a certain degree. But CambridgeAudio are a UK-based business. I actually have to be honest, I've no idea if they sell internationally or not. They position themselves at the high-quality budget end of the market. Their stuff's never cheap, but it's really good value for what you get. And this is an example of it. Now, in 2007, this audio streamer sold for £600 in the UK, and this was a 160 gig hard drive, and just the presentation of the unit gives you some idea of the quality that you can expect for that. Now, like I say, that's not cheap by any stretch, but for the quality of audio and the hardware you get, I think that's quite good. I actually own a CambridgeAudio amp. It's the one that I use every day in my home office, as often as I can in my home office, and they're rock solid. The build quality is very, very good, and the sound quality is good enough for most people, and feature-wise, they're good. The CambridgeAudio 640H music server. As you can probably see on the front, we've got a CD drive and a little display. So what you can do is you pop your CDs in and it will rip them to an internal hard drive. And then you can use this as a music server to play them on other devices around the house. As far as I'm aware, this actually uses DLNA or UPnP device music sharing. So it would work with other items from other manufacturers. But of course, CambridgeAudio also built players that you could buy around. They also did a whole range of Incognito, I think was the series name of the equipment, which was like a multi-room inbuilt audio with ceiling mount speakers and wall-mounted panels. It was nice, but I was never able to afford anything quite that cool at the time. The other little feature that this music streamer had up its sleeve was, you may be able to tell, that's not just a CD reader, that's a CD writer. So you rip your music library to this device and you can burn your own custom CDs on this, not using a separate computer. Now in 2007, this was quite a big deal. Yes, iTunes had taken off for the iPod. The iPhone was only released this year. Digital media was a big deal, but people still had big collections of discs. So this was kind of an important device. Music streamers, music servers, I feel it's a bit disappointing really, because they should have been a bigger part of home networks for longer, and just they kind of skipped a generation between CDs and streaming, really. I've got to say, when I saw the unit, I made some assumptions really early on. Now, you can see two PS2 ports, VGA monitor, USB and Ethernet, and that layout, to me, is absolutely classic ATX motherboard layout. So I'm expecting most of the components in here to be based around a PC. What does get interesting is from about here onwards, that serial port is probably on board with a motherboard, but I think that IR emitter and everything else down here is going to be on a custom high-end audio card. That'd be very interesting based on the fact this is 13 years old, to know what the PC inside this runs and whether that custom board could be fitted to modern hardware. We're only going to find out one way, so let's go for it. I suppose the other way to look at this is it's actually quite a nice bit of hardware in terms of home theatre or separate setups. I remember there being quite a big thing about this kind of time, 2005, 6, 7. Everybody wanting a home theatre PC because it was the best way to get digital content to your TV. But there weren't very many home theatre cases around. And I kind of wonder If people had known that this was PC hardware, whether it actually would have taken off in the modder community, especially with the add-on of a high-end sound card, which is what this has got the potential to be, man, this would have been killer, an absolutely brilliant piece of kit. Most people's complaint about home theatre PC cases at the time was noise from the fans on the power supply. I don't believe this has one. However, I have been warned that apparently the hard drive makes a horrendous noise when you turn it on. Not an issue these days, you could use a solid state drive, and of course there's no moving parts. There we go. It's a nice pressed steel lid, but yeah, there's the CambridgeAudio logo. Just a little bit of foam on the inside of this corner. CPU fan just underneath, so maybe a little bit of sound deadening on the inside just to take the edge off that 40mm fan, which probably would have whined quite a lot in operation. Well, considering this is something that the consumer is not generally supposed to see, there is a lot of custom hardware and branding in here just to make things look good. On top of the CD drive, you've got a nice custom CambridgeAudio plate, normal Hitachi hard drive, 164GB, an old IDE drive. And again, you start seeing these custom boards. You've got the nice big heatsink around the transformer. Now that's going to be absolutely fascinating. That is what gives this unit most of its hefty weight. You can feel the weight on that side. Hard drive unplugged, I think. Man, it's going to get really old turning this over a lot quickly. So the hard drive's in that corner. So I think those two screws are probably on the bottom of the hard drive cage. Okay. Actually, that's very interesting in itself. So this hard drive enclosure, with a tiny little bit of rubber at the bottom to maybe help with the anti-vibration, but when it's screwed to the case it's not going to make too much difference, is actually double. You could fit a second hard drive in here, which, okay, looks like they've only given you an IDE ribbon with a single connector, but it's not that hard to replace, and you could get a double hard drive in there. Could be useful for expansion or for RAID. So otherwise, normal 160 gig IDE hard drive. There we go. This little board is the power supply that takes, just a pair of incoming cables. So that's just taking a single 12 volt AC feed. Maybe I'm jumping the gun. Maybe it's not even AC that it's taking. CN13 WH BLWH. Oh, white, blue, white. At least it tells you the color configuration for these two cables, so you can work out by process of elimination what the third one is. Right, so we're going to have to pay attention and make a note of what all of these connectors actually do. We're going to come back to this, and that is a tiny ITX scale motherboard. Am I missing a screw? Of course. The old RS232 and the VGA port have got their captive nuts holding it in. There we go, tiny little ITX size motherboard. I would imagine that's probably an Atom CPU, albeit it might be a little bit old for that. It might just be a low-end Celeron, something to that effect. Nice normal stick of DIMM memory. How much have we got? Kingston 128 meg of RAM. It's interesting that this actually came with so many video connectors. You didn't get many motherboards at the time with VGA, S-video and composite output. That was quite unique. I understand that when you first turned this on, you were supposed to do a load of config using a VGA monitor. I don't think I've ever actually seen that done. So actually, if you look on here, there's an extra 25 pin header that's unpopulated. And we've got an audio output here, which probably was used for the 3.5mm jacks. There's normally a little stack of 3 on a PC motherboard. So line in, line out microphone. And these look like they've actually been desoldered. So this motherboard, the EPIA-N Rev B, we can probably look up a datasheet for this and find it had a parallel port, which of course was completely superfluous, and the audio ports, which they absolutely didn't want people to use. So it'd be quite interesting to see if we can get a datasheet on that. If this is a standard part that's had ports desoldered, that must have cost a fortune to manufacture. Well, were they selling enough of these in bulk that they could have gone and said, please can we have more, less? How about next we start on the power nut split ring washer, lock washer, whatever you choose to call it, then a washer, the transformer, which also seems to be stuck on the bottom, nice big bolt, and then a massive washer to reinforce the base. They definitely didn't want that slipping and sliding about in this case. Wow, look at the winding on that transformer. So this is a nice multi-tapping transformer, but it's multi-tapping in various ways. It's not just input, it's not just multi-tapping on the output, it's multi-tapping on the input too. Now, I would like to praise one neat little touch here, is they've got the 50-60Hz 230-110 switch on the top here, except it's actually covered behind a plastic case, so you can't accidentally do it. To flick that, you've really got to mean it. That's a nice touch, I definitely like that. It's interesting you don't often find squeaky screws. Okay, and that should be the power supply totally removed. So we've got another massive block of foam right at the back there. That one I'm totally at a loss about because it's sort of sat up against the transformer. Bit weird, but okay. So on the incoming side of the board, we've got a quick blow glass fuse in a little sort of perspex enclosure, very nice. Soldered connections for all the mains power, also covered in Celastic, which is a nice touch. Input mains voltage selection switch up here, and then they both feed into the transformer. So up here you've got your 230, 110 and your neutral feeding into the transformer, and on your outgoing side you've got a nice big power supply going to the bottom of your audio board, your custom board over here, and you've also got some low voltage connections. We'll check out what those are when we dig into the custom board over there. But this transformer, it's beautiful, and it's described on the top as ultra low stray magnetic field, high efficiency, low loss, excellent regulation characteristics. They certainly praise that transformer, and that to me is the big thing that turns this from a PC with a good sound card into a high-end bit of audio kit, because the switch mode power supply is very liable to introduce noise on your analog audio signals. It's actually a very good design here, the optical drive, and it actually looks like this has either been out once before or has been nudged back. That the optical drive's got that little bit of horizontal adjustment to be able to get it front and back, because actually this CD drive is slightly recessed in on the front panel. I would think that's supposed to have been flush, and it's all those nice little touches which allow the assembly to get this unit perfect again and again and again. And with all these screws and the way it's manufactured, you've got to assume this was hand assembled and with a lot of care. So normal IDE CD drive, not a lot to write home about there, although of course they have replaced the front bezel, which is easy enough to do on most CD drives, but this is actually replaced with an aluminium one. You don't often see a metal replacement for a CD drive. And this lovely labelled up cover for the CD drive is just a bit of stamped aluminium that's taped on top by the looks of things. Trouble is, it's such a nice touch, I don't really want to destroy it unnecessarily, especially since this is borrowed and I've got to give it back. Yeah, it's interesting that these sides, which I still kind of expected to be an extrusion, are just pressed steel with a plastic, the only bit of plastic, I hasten to add, in the entire machine, just holding that profile in shape. And then the insides are filled with this acoustic foam. Clever way of saving money where it doesn't actually affect the audio, especially the replacing a custom bespoke extrusion with a pressed sheet and some acoustic deadening which will mimic the effect of the solid material. Clever. So in the front we've got multi-layer custom PCBs. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting. Interesting that on the silk screen for this PCB they've actually got instructions on where to put the screws, or how to put the screws, or the type of screw to put in. So I'm kind of picturing that these are going to be, these go behind the number pad, so they're probably taking a lot of stress or strain. There we go. So this board, even though it's got screws at the top, this bottom bit is like on threaded studs, and for whatever reason This one was binding onto the PCB at the bottom, and I really didn't want to bend it or flex it more than I had to. So, yep, there you go. There's front plate connector, tact switches, crystal display driver, USB port, which is interesting because that's actually passed through from the motherboard. Well, again, we're going to come back to that. Just a row of low-rise tact switches and the infrared receiver PCB display. It's nice that actually both sides of every connection are labelled, so you know on the back of, on the front of here, sorry, this says switch PCB, power LED. Over here, this says display PCB, and sure enough, that fits in there to display PCB. There you go. Those are the insides of your CambridgeAudio 640H audio streamer. It's a PC with a load of custom hardware. In particular, I find the power supply very interesting, but it's not this on its own. This only gives us the AC voltages out that we can then play with, which means this board is the really interesting one. This takes the power in, this takes audio in, this takes USB, because this connector here is actually a USB connector from the motherboard. It's normally used for front panel USB, so when you've got USB outlets on the front of your computer, there's normally a little header like this one, which then feeds those front panel plugs. But this goes from there to this. So this is a USB device, which would be really interesting because in theory, that means we could turn this on, plug it in with a USB port to another computer, and it should pick up as a specialist USB sound card, I guess? That might be fun to try. So this has got the DC out, so that's the power that goes from here to this little tiny switch mode board. And this is going to be a voltage regulator board. You can get similar ones when you're doing your own custom projects. And this takes, in this case, 12 volts DC and gives you all the plus minus, and it actually says on the back here, it's neatly labelled. So all of those pins plug straight into the motherboard in an old 20-pin ATX connector. And that's a neat solution. It also has the Molex output, which then goes through a splitter lead to the CD and the hard drive. This board is the thing that turns this into something other than a PC is beautiful. The labelling they've gone into here, analog negative, analog plus, all these regulators, all these linear regulators, DC analog, DAC analog, DAC digi, clock, decoder, front panel IR, because all of these have got their own regulator so you don't get interference and noise, which for audio is very important. And I understand that is a Wolfson analog to digital converter under here doing most of the heavy lifting for the audio. So looking at this front panel assembly, we have connections here. This is RS232 to motherboard, so something on this board works on RS232, which is only interesting because there's unpopulated jumpers over here that say RS232 board select. So it's got the potential here for this to run off of, to run at different baud rates. So again, you've got some capability here for modding. There's a little heartbeat LED unpopulated up there. That'd be kind of fun. So in this assembly, we've also got display drivers, USB output, this nice little switch daughter board. It's got a cap on it for smoothing, but I don't believe it's doing any multiplexing or anything, or any matrix for the buttons. They all look like they've got their own distinct traces. You've got one egg that runs the way down, and individual traces back to the header. I don't think it really matters which way you choose to look at this, whether it's a custom PC with a high-end sound card or you look at it with as high-end audio kit with PC functionality. Either way, it's a really nicely put together, well thought through piece of equipment. There's great electronic stability and very clever manipulation of the two things to turn them into a single unit. I still think it's a shame that audio streamers didn't take off in quite the way they would. And also, it's kind of a shame that as soon as you put PC or electronics in, or software in something, it instantly has an end of life. Windows XP, which I understand this ran on, reached end of life support in 2012. So this has technically been defunct without support from Microsoft for a long time. But it's interesting that I think there's a lot of scope to add the good hardware onto new equipment and add a new bit of software to it. If you found this interesting, you have ideas for your own teardowns, or you'd like to ask more questions, head over to the Element 14 community at element14.com/the electronics inside. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.